Selina adjusted the gold clasp of her bracelet, the one her grandmother had given her years ago as a reminder of strength and perseverance. She had worn it to every important event, believing it carried a shield of dignity. Tonight was supposed to be no different. The annual Blackwell Foundation Gala was not only the city's most anticipated charity event but also a gathering of influence. Politicians, tycoons, heirs of old fortunes, and those desperate to be included in such a world. Selina's husband, Adrian Hale, was always among the most honored guests, and as his wife, her presence had never been questioned. Until now. The envelope that arrived at their home gleamed with embossed lettering, but as Selina unfolded the cream paper, her eyes skimmed over the names printed neatly in black ink. Adrian Hale. No Selina Hale. At first, she thought it was a misprint, an absent-minded error by an assistant. Yet the deeper she looked, the more the truth gnawed at her. Every spouse was listed. Every partner recognized, except her. Her chest tightened, not only from the sting of exclusion but from the realization that this was no mistake. Someone had made the deliberate choice to erase her. Selina was not naive. She had encountered whispers before, subtle questions about how a black woman had secured a place beside one of the nation's wealthiest men. She had brushed off the glances, the backhanded compliments, the carefully veiled disbelief. But this was different. This was public, undeniable, and calculated. For a moment, she sat frozen, the weight of silence pressing down on her. Then, slowly, she straightened her back. If this was an attempt to diminish her, they had underestimated the woman they tried to erase. Selina's story had never been one of privilege, though her composure often suggested otherwise. Born in a modest neighborhood on the south side of the city, she was raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a nursing home. Life, from the beginning, was layered with challenges, but Selina carried herself with an inner poise that seemed to defy circumstance. While other children grumbled about hand-me-down clothes or budget meals, Selina learned to treat each day as an opportunity to grow stronger. Her mother often told her, "Dignity is not what you wear, it's how you stand." Those words became the foundation of her life. She excelled in school, graduating at the top of her class, and won a scholarship to study business administration. She possessed not just intelligence but a quiet resilience, an ability to rise above condescension and stereotyping without ever letting bitterness dim her spirit. Friends often admired her humility. Despite her sharp mind, she treated everyone with the same respect she wished to receive. It was during a leadership seminar at a downtown hotel that she first met Adrian Hale. He was already well known, a billionaire investor who could command a room without raising his voice. Yet what struck Selina wasn't his reputation or wealth, but the way he listened when she spoke. He seemed genuinely curious about her perspective, treating her as an equal rather than as someone to impress. Their relationship blossomed slowly, built not on glamour but on conversation, shared values, and mutual admiration. Adrian admired her clarity of vision, her refusal to compromise her integrity, and the way she grounded him when the trappings of wealth threatened to consume him. Selina, in turn, admired his humility, the rare ability to balance immense power with compassion. When they married, whispers followed, but their bond only deepened. For Selina, wealth never defined her. What defined her was the same dignity she had carried since childhood, the understanding that respect could not be bought, only earned. Together, they were more than husband and wife. They were partners, equals, and proof that true love was not about status, but about standing side by side in a world that sometimes struggled to accept them. Adrian Hale had built an empire on vision, discipline, and an uncanny instinct for opportunity. His name often appeared on the covers of financial magazines, accompanied by phrases like powerhouse, tycoon, or the golden investor. To the world, he was the epitome of success, sharp suits, private jets, and the kind of authority that made others lean forward when he spoke. Yet behind closed doors, Adrian was not the stereotype of a cold or untouchable billionaire. Those who knew him personally understood that Adrian carried an uncommon trait among the wealthy, a strong moral compass. He believed that influence came with responsibility. He was generous with philanthropy, funding scholarships, hospitals, and social programs without seeking applause. But what truly set him apart was his protective devotion to those he loved, especially Selina. He often admitted, sometimes to her embarrassment, that she was the reason he had remained grounded despite his fortune. "Without you," he once told her during a quiet evening on their balcony, "I might have become another arrogant man who thought money was everything." Selina's perspective, her refusal to be dazzled by wealth, reminded him daily that integrity mattered more than image. Adrian admired her strength most of all. He had watched her face subtle slights at events, endure thinly veiled condescension, and still rise above with elegance. Each time, he found himself more in awe. Her resilience taught him that true power did not come from financial leverage but from self-respect. To Adrian, Selina was not just his wife, she was the compass that guided him. His loyalty to her was absolute, a quiet vow sealed not by vows at the altar but by every day he chose to honor and protect her dignity. Their love was not ornamental, it was the core of who he was, and it would become the force that no guest list, no prejudice, could ever erase. The following week, another envelope arrived at the Hale residence, this time smaller, less ceremonious. Selina opened it at the breakfast table, her coffee still steaming beside her. The note inside was brief, written in stiff, formal prose. "We regret to inform you that due to limited capacity, your name was regrettably omitted from this year's Blackwell Foundation Gala guest list. We hope for your kind understanding." Selina read the words twice, her hand tightening around the paper. Omitted. The word struck like a slap. The gala was not some minor affair, it was the event of the season, where presence equaled recognition, and absence was a statement. And as her eyes wandered over the morning paper, she noticed familiar names already being publicized as attendees. Spouses of businessmen far less influential than Adrian, partners of investors whose reputations paled in comparison. Even newcomers who had clawed their way into the city's elite circles were listed. Everyone but her. Her chest hollowed with realization. This was no oversight, no innocent clerical mistake. She had been deliberately erased. Not because she lacked stature, Adrian's wife was never lacking, but because she did not fit the image certain gatekeepers wanted to present. In a room where glittering gowns, pale champagne, and polished heritage were currency, Selina's presence was considered disruptive. Not by her actions, but by her very existence as a black woman beside a billionaire husband. She folded the letter neatly, refusing to let her hands tremble. Outwardly calm, inwardly burning, she placed it on the table in front of Adrian. He read it once, then twice, before his jaw tightened and the faintest muscle twitched at his temple. His fury was not loud, it was controlled, simmering beneath a surface of composure. "They think this will go unnoticed," he said finally, voice low but edged with steel. Selina shook her head, her expression one of weary grace. "Let it be. I've endured worse." But Adrian's eyes met hers, unwavering, protective. "No. They erased you to belittle you. And if they believe I will stand by silently, they've made a grave mistake." In that moment, the insult no longer belonged to her alone. It had become their insult, and Adrian would not allow it to stand. That evening, as twilight spilled across their penthouse windows, Selina sat curled on the velvet sofa, the letter folded neatly on the coffee table like a reminder she wished to ignore. She had spent her life perfecting the art of brushing aside slights, of refusing to give prejudice more power than it already stole. "It isn't worth it," she murmured when Adrian joined her, his expression still carved from quiet fury. "We'll stay home. Let them have their little party." Adrian lowered himself beside her, his gaze sharp yet tender. "No, Selina. This isn't about a party. This is about respect. If they disrespect you, they disrespect me. And I won't allow anyone to make you invisible." Selina's lips curved into a soft, tired smile. She admired his fire, yet she feared the confrontation would spiral into unnecessary spectacle. Still, his words struck something deep within her. She was weary of being expected to rise above every insult in silence. Perhaps it was time to stand visibly, undeniably present. "So what do you propose?" she asked, lifting her chin, her eyes gleaming with quiet challenge. "We'll go," Adrian replied firmly. "Together. Not as an afterthought, not as a compromise, together. You will walk in as my honored guest, as my wife, as the woman this city should be grateful to know." Selina felt a flicker of defiance stir in her chest, a warmth that reminded her of her grandmother's words about dignity. She rose, crossed to her wardrobe, and carefully pulled free a gown she had saved for an occasion worthy of it. A flowing creation of deep violet satin, embroidered with gold threads that caught the light like fire. It was not simply beautiful, it was regal, commanding, impossible to ignore. As she held it against her, Adrian's breath caught. "Perfect," he said. "You look like royalty." Selina met his gaze, a quiet strength settling over her. "Not royalty," she corrected softly. "Simply myself. And that will be enough." The Blackwell Foundation Gala was held at the grandiose Marlowe Hotel, its marble staircases lit by crystal chandeliers that dripped light like liquid diamonds. The evening buzzed with chatter as sleek cars pulled up one after another, depositing gowns and tuxedos into the glittering lobby. But when the Hale limousine stopped at the entrance, a subtle shift rippled through the air, as if anticipation itself had paused to listen. Adrian stepped out first, tall and commanding in a tailored black tuxedo, his presence alone enough to draw eyes. Yet the true disruption came when he extended his hand and Selina emerged beside him. Draped in the violet gown that shimmered with golden undertones, she looked ethereal, like a queen who needed no crown to command respect. The rich hue of the fabric set her apart from the sea of silvers and blacks, daring anyone to pretend they did not see her. For a moment, silence fell. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses hovered just short of lips. The orchestra continued to play, but its music seemed almost background to the sudden, charged stillness in the room. Then came the whispers, soft at first, then rippling louder like the tide. "She wasn't on the list." "How did she get in?" "That's Adrian Hale's wife." Selina heard it all, every syllable sharpened by disbelief and thinly veiled irritation. But she did not falter. Her posture remained tall, her expression serene, her arm looped gracefully through Adrian's. The deliberate dignity in her presence transformed what could have been a scene of humiliation into one of unshakable triumph. The hosts, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, stood at the entrance, smiles faltering as the couple approached. Their shock was skillfully masked with polite greetings, but their eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. They had expected compliance, perhaps even absence, but not defiance dressed in silk and gold. Adrian never left Selina's side. At every handshake, every posed photograph, he kept her close, his hand firm against hers as though to announce wordlessly, "This woman is mine, my equal, my pride." His subtle acts of solidarity were more powerful than any grand speech. And so the night began, not with the host's usual air of control, but with Selina's undeniable presence reshaping the atmosphere. She had been erased from the paper list, but in that glittering hall, her very existence became the headline no one could ignore. As the evening progressed, the undercurrents of tension became harder to ignore. Selina could feel the weight of eyes following her through the ballroom, their gazes sliding away the moment she turned to meet them. Some guests pretended not to notice her at all, offering greetings exclusively to Adrian as though she were invisible at his side. Others engaged in conversation but spoke over her, their voices pitched to Adrian while their eyes carefully avoided hers. A cluster of women, dripping in diamonds, soon approached with smiles as polished as their manicures. "What a bold choice of gown," one said, her tone sugar-sweet but edged with condescension. "Not many would dare such a color." Selina tilted her head, allowing a calm smile to curve her lips. "Perhaps that's why it suits me," she replied, her voice smooth, each word deliberate. The woman's expression faltered, and another quickly jumped in. "And your jewelry, it's unusual. Very sentimental, I imagine." She gestured to the gold bracelet on Selina's wrist, her eyes glittering with the suggestion that it looked out of place among their diamonds. Selina touched the bracelet gently, her gaze steady. "Yes. It was my grandmother's. She wore it every day of her life. I can't think of anything more valuable than that." The simplicity of her response, paired with her serene tone, left the group momentarily speechless. Adrian, standing just a step behind, watched every exchange with an intensity few could perceive. His smile never wavered, his demeanor calm, but his eyes followed each slight, each barb disguised as civility. His hand rested lightly at Selina's back, not in possession but in solidarity, as if reassuring her silently, "I see it too, and I am with you." The whispers, the forced smiles, the rehearsed politeness, they only strengthened Selina's resolve. She did not raise her voice, nor did she bend under the pressure. With each sharp yet dignified reply, she unsettled her critics more effectively than anger ever could. By the time the women drifted away, their laughter just a bit too brittle, it was clear that Selina had already won a quiet battle. Adrian, however, knew the night's greatest confrontation was yet to come. It was midway through the evening when Mrs. Blackwell finally approached. She glided across the ballroom with a smile fixed so tightly it seemed carved from porcelain. Guests subtly leaned closer, sensing a performance about to unfold. "Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale," she began, her voice dripping with exaggerated warmth. "How lovely to see you both. I do hope there was no confusion with the invitations this year. You know how terribly overbooked we can become, so many names, so little space." Her laugh was light, rehearsed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as they darted briefly to Selina's gown, then back to Adrian. It was a flimsy attempt at smoothing over the insult, as if Selina could be placated with a shallow apology wrapped in excuses. Adrian's expression remained polite, but his voice carried the weight of steel when he spoke. "Confusion, Mrs. Blackwell, is when a letter is misplaced. When a name is deliberately removed from a guest list, that is not confusion. That is intent." The surrounding conversation faltered. Glasses paused mid-air. Even the orchestra seemed to soften, the music fading into the background as if the room itself strained to listen. Mrs. Blackwell's smile faltered, her painted lips trembling for the briefest moment. "Oh, I assure you, there was nothing deliberate about it." Adrian cut her off smoothly, his tone controlled but unyielding. "Selina is my wife, my partner, and the most dignified woman in this room. To erase her name was to insult her. And if you intended to pretend otherwise, I think this evening has already proven that such pretense cannot hold." A hush fell over the ballroom, sharp and heavy. No one dared to speak. The truth, laid bare in Adrian's calm but pointed words, could not be ignored. For once, Mrs. Blackwell, the master of elite gatherings, found herself exposed in her own domain. Selina stood gracefully at Adrian's side, her silence louder than any argument. And in that silence, the crowd understood, the erasure had failed. Dinner was nearly served when Adrian rose from his seat, glass of champagne in hand. The motion was simple, but it commanded the attention of the entire ballroom. Conversation stilled, forks paused, and every gaze turned toward him. Adrian Hale was known for many things, his empire, his philanthropy, his unshakable influence, but he was not known for unnecessary speeches. If he stood, it meant his words mattered. He glanced first at Selina, who sat beside him, her violet gown glowing under the chandeliers. Then he turned back to the audience, his voice steady, rich with authority. "Tonight," he began, "we gather for a noble cause, charity, compassion, the betterment of society. Yet I cannot ignore the irony that in this very room, among those who pride themselves on generosity, an act of deliberate exclusion occurred." A murmur spread across the tables, but Adrian pressed on. "My wife, Selina Hale, was erased from this guest list. Not forgotten, not misplaced, erased. The excuse was limited space, yet I see dozens of seats filled by those whose only claim to them is legacy, not contribution. Selina, on the other hand, has dedicated her life to service, to lifting others as she herself has risen. If this is what exclusion looks like, then it says more about the hosts than about her." He lifted his glass slightly higher, his gaze sweeping across the uneasy crowd. "Let me make something very clear. My greatest wealth is not measured in billions or investments. My greatest wealth is sitting right beside me. Selina is my compass, my strength, and the reason I remember what all of this is for. To deny her is to deny the very values this gala pretends to uphold." A heavy silence blanketed the room. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared at their plates as though the crystal patterns might swallow them whole. A few, caught between admiration and guilt, nodded faintly. Adrian finished with a deliberate calm. If this circle of so-called society cannot recognize dignity, resilience, and integrity when it stands before them, then perhaps it is society itself that needs redefining. He clinked his glass gently against Selina's, the sound ringing like a gavel in the hush. The message was unmistakable. The insult had been overturned, and the tables had turned. As Adrian sat down, the echo of his words still lingered in the ballroom. All eyes turned toward Selina, waiting for her reaction. Some expected a display of pride, perhaps even gloating. Others hoped she would shrink beneath the weight of the attention. But Selina did neither. She rose slowly, smoothing the folds of her violet gown, her posture regal yet unpretentious. She looked across the sea of faces, some red with embarrassment, others pale with discomfort. When she spoke, her voice was soft, yet it carried with surprising clarity, slicing through the silence like silk. "Dignity," she said, pausing just long enough for the word to settle, "cannot be erased. Not by omissions, not by prejudice, not by silence. It lives within us. And when we choose to walk in it, no list, no room, no person can take it away." The statement was brief, but it landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples outward. For a heartbeat, the room was utterly still. Then, slowly, applause began. A few clapped with genuine admiration, their faces alight with respect. Others joined reluctantly, their hands moving stiffly, as though compelled by the weight of expectation rather than sincerity. Yet regardless of intent, the sound grew, filling the hall until it became impossible to distinguish forced praise from heartfelt recognition. Selina inclined her head gracefully, neither basking in the attention nor dismissing it. Her calm acceptance of the moment turned her presence into something larger than defiance. It became a statement, a mirror that forced the room to confront its own smallness. For the rest of the evening, conversations inevitably circled back to her. Whispers about her elegance, her composure, her words, eclipsed even the night's scheduled performances. She had walked into the gala as the woman erased from the list, but she was leaving as its undeniable highlight, the living proof that dignity shines brightest when others try hardest to dim it. By the time dessert was served, the gala's glittering veneer had cracked. The whispers that once dismissed Selina now revolved around her strength, her poise, her words that lingered in the air long after she had spoken them. Guests leaned toward one another, trading observations with lowered voices. She handled it with such grace. "Did you hear what Adrian said about her?" Imagine being erased, and yet she outshone them all. The applause, whether genuine or forced, had shifted the balance of the evening. No longer was Mrs. Blackwell in control of her carefully curated event. Instead, she found herself at the center of a storm she could not contain. Her attempt to sideline Selina had backfired spectacularly, leaving her reputation in shreds. "Arrogance," someone muttered. "Or worse." The word racism hovered unspoken but heavy, exchanged in glances rather than speech. For a woman who prided herself on being the gatekeeper of society, the stain was irreversible. Her laughter rang hollow, her smiles brittle, as even her closest allies began to edge away, unwilling to be associated with a scandal that now tainted the very air of the ballroom. Selina, however, did not linger on the destruction left behind her. She did not need to. With Adrian's hand firmly clasped around hers, she rose when the moment felt right, excusing themselves with quiet dignity. There was no dramatic exit, no demand for attention, only the serene assurance of two people who knew they had already won. As they stepped into the cool night, the sounds of muffled chatter and strained music faded behind them. Together, hand in hand, they left not as victims of exclusion but as the very embodiment of resilience and grace, untouchable by the chaos they left in their wake. The limousine glided through the city streets, its tinted windows reflecting the glittering skyline. Inside, silence reigned, not the heavy silence of anger, but the peaceful quiet of two souls who no longer needed words. Selina leaned back against the leather seat, her bracelet catching the faint glow of passing lights. She traced its familiar curve with her fingers, grounding herself in the memory of the woman who had given it to her. When they reached home, Adrian poured them both a glass of wine and guided her onto the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying the distant hum of traffic, but in that private space, the world seemed far away. Selina broke the silence first. "I thought I would feel satisfaction," she admitted softly, watching them squirm, seeing their hypocrisy exposed. "But I don't. I only feel relieved. I didn't need revenge tonight. My dignity was enough." Adrian turned toward her, his gaze steady, his expression touched with pride. He took her hand, lifting it gently as though it were something sacred. "Selina," he said, his voice low but resolute, "no one erases you when you're my world. They can strike your name from a list, they can whisper behind closed doors, but they can never take away who you are, or what you mean to me." Tears pricked her eyes, not from pain but from the deep truth of his words. In that moment, she realized the real victory had never been about silencing critics. It was about standing unshaken, supported by a love that was stronger than any prejudice, any insult, any attempt to erase her. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the city lights glittering like stars beneath them. Together, they stood as proof that true power was not measured in wealth, titles, or prestige, but in respect, in love, and in the dignity no one could strip away. And though the world might continue its whispers and exclusions, Selina knew she had already written her own legacy, one of grace, resilience, and unshakable pride. A legacy that no guest list could ever contain.